Give me fuel, give me fire, give me double time.
It may seem odd to say today, but NASCAR and NBC at one time was a very controversial NASCAR TV partner, and it was Fox who was actually the one who was the most popular. Back in the day, Fuel by Metallica would open up the broadcast and you knew NASCAR was in town for the second half of the season, and it was very hit or miss whether or not you'd get a great show. But looking back in hindsight, why did NASCAR and NBC fail the first time compared to how it's been the second time, even with drastically different results? Well, that's what we're going to look at today. It all starts out in 2000. NASCAR and NBC has a little bit of a trial run at Homestead Miami Speedway. This is a one-race deal in 2000, kind of getting their feet wet for the new contract that they signed for 2001 through 2006. Part of a $2.5 billion deal that will basically jettison NASCAR to the mainstream, NBC is doing something that only Fox will do along with them. Try to make NASCAR a hit with the mainstream and the general public. And to be fair, it had a pretty good plan. NBC would partner with Turner Sports, who had been on NASCAR coverage with TBS, and they'd have TBS cover the cable portion of their deal. Now, over time, they changed this from TBS to TNT, as the slogan "We Know Drama" really felt like it would fit NASCAR well, as NASCAR was definitely a national drama on a big stage, thus ending a 17-year run of NASCAR on TBS. But there had to be progress into the future, and with them covering the last half of the season, it was going to be pretty big. Now, they also had a deal with Fox that they would go back and forth. They would have the Daytona 500 in the even years, and Fox would have them in the odd. So Fox had them in 01, 03, and 05. NBC had them in 02, 04. And 06. And to be fair, the on-air talent was really good as well, with plenty of veteran pit reporters and a great booth with tons of energy with Alan Bestwick, Wally Dellenbach Jr., and of course, BP, Benny Parsons. And nowhere else would this have been a more fitting start for them than Daytona. Unfortunately, we all know the tragedy that happened in the 2001 Daytona 500, and with it, the storyline of Dale Earnhardt Jr. returning to the track that took his father's life would be prominent heading into it. Now, this wasn't the only thing NBC had focused on either. They had a huge ad blitz on basically any property they owned, even getting stars by the likes of Britney Spears, who at the time was the biggest superstar in the world, not only to help promote the event with Jeff Gordon, but also to be a guest at the track. NASCAR was the it thing. It was the fad. It was similar to what Formula One is today. Something that no one really knows why it's taking off the way it is as much, but it definitely is catching something correct in the generation watching. And, well, this race started out amazing. You first, of course, had the storyline that became a complete fairy tale of Dale Earnhardt Jr. returning to the track that took his father's life to win in dominating fashion, looking like said father. And in doing that, 25 million people in total watched all or part of that race, the biggest primetime audience in all of NASCAR's history. And in their 20 races that they had at the end of the season, they were up 34% compared to the same races a year ago in 2000, and their NASCAR Busch Series races were up 75% compared to the same races run a year ago on the old deals. It was pretty clear in the first year that, one, the contract in total was a complete success, but NBC in particular also did a great job keeping up on the momentum that Fox Sports had built up early on in the season. But how would it translate to their first Daytona 500 that they would broadcast in 2002? Well, it would become the most watched race at the time in NASCAR history, as tons and tons of people, 35 million at that, watched all or part of the race where Ward Burton brought home the Great American Race, the Harley J. Earl Trophy, and the win of the Daytona 500. And this wasn't even the end of it either. While there was also a great championship battle going at the time, with Tony Stewart and Mark Martin in particular being front and center of it, their portion of the season at the end was up 13% over their monumental gains in 2001. So far, 2 years in now, this is amazing. Everybody is winning, everybody's cashing in, and it's looking like this might be the start of a beautiful relationship. Well, in 2003, they settled with having a settled championship. Matt Kenseth clinched a week early, and it should not have been any surprise that the finale was down by 13% year over year, and the ratings at the end of the season actually were down a little bit for NBC. This definitely could have been a speed bump in the road or start of something worse, but what it did was start a new era in a lot of ways. While Brian France is definitely seen as the one who was responsible for the chase for the Nextel Cup being a thing, it was also NBC who helped give that final push for it, wanting an ensured championship fight at the end of the season. Make no mistake, the chase was something that was conceptualized back all the way in the 90s, and it just needed the right partner or partners to really push it into reality, and this is what NBC did. So, how'd it go in 2004? Well, the inaugural chase for the Nextel Cup, while controversial, proved to be action-packed. It proved to have suspense behind every corner, fan favorites as well as those who were hated, racing against each other in an intense 10-man battle in 10 weeks to the finish, culminating in an exciting 2004 Ford 400 with 5 drivers realistically competing for the championship, the most that we had seen since 1992 with the Hooters 500 that year. And it should be no surprise either that the chase was up 10% in ratings and the finale was up 38% to be the most watched finale probably ever in NASCAR history. Going into 2005, this was the all-time high year in viewership. Things continued to get better for Fox and NBC alike, as everyone was again winning all over again. 2003 was looking like a hell of a blip. But the chase, while being up 2%, would have a finale down 15% as Tony Stewart pretty much had the championship, while not locked, on standby and ready to go. And then, of course, you have 2006, which had a great thing for NBC and a not-so-great thing. The great thing being the Daytona 500, which ended up being the most watched race ever in NASCAR, and to this day has not been beaten, with over 37 million people seeing at least some part of the race while it was live. The problem, though, is that this was a lame duck year for NBC, as they would be out in 2007 in place for ABC and ESPN. So, how did this all come to be? How did such a lucrative deal end up failing? Well, controversies was a big part of it. To kick it off, from the start of their tenure in NASCAR, fans would always make fun of them, saying that NBC meant nothing but commercials. This is not something that's new with modern fans. NASCAR fans have always disliked commercials breaking up their broadcasts, and while Fox had done it in extreme numbers as well, NBC seemed much more prominent, as 1, it was in a later part of the year, 2, they did much more frequent ads back-to-back at times, especially under Green, and 3, just once you got to that from the get-go, fans were not going to cut them a break. Now, like I said, not a new problem, but what was a problem back then that was kind of unique was removing a fan-favorite commentator in Alan Bestwick from the booth. Bestwick has been one of, if not the greatest of all NASCAR commentators, and in 2004, he broke his ankle before Talladega in the fall. Now, he was hurt, so it didn't seem too out of the ordinary that they had to last minute put Bill Weber up in the booth, the man who normally did the pre-race show. Except that they made this permanent in 2005, basically flipping Weber and Bestwick's positions for the last 2 years of the deal. While Weber really wasn't as bad as many say he was, he still wasn't good by any means. He repeated himself far too often, had a grating voice, and would also make some pretty egregious mistakes, messing up drivers' names on a semi-regular basis. And with this, when you see that versus the GOAT of Alan Bestwick, you can understand why a lot of fans were pretty livid and pissed. And then, of course, once they're a lame duck, This is only soured more by the 2006 deal at Martinsville, where NBC would send in people for their show Dateline to try and bait NASCAR fans into reactions by having people dressed to look like stereotypical Arabs to try and get a reaction out of them. And, well, they didn't get a reaction out of them. And once Brian France and those at NASCAR found out about this, they were rightfully livid and pissed and couldn't wait for the deal to be over with the entire company. While this did not fall on anyone who worked for NBC Sports at the time, it was still a huge black eye on a deal that, for the most part, had still been a very positive one. So, this all, as well as NBC Sports getting Sunday Night Football, would end up breaking up the partnership of NBC and NASCAR, as those two, Sunday Night Football and NASCAR, overlapped in 2006 at times, causing races to have to go off the air as soon as finishes were done, in a crucial time of the season where once again 5 drivers were competing for a championship. But about 10 years later, the two did reunite in 2015. And while the results, ratings-wise, have not been as positive, they have worked together much better and have pushed a lot of good agendas into the future for NASCAR to try and make good groundwork. And it seems like at the moment that they're gonna renew for 2025, being the first time that 2 broadcast partners in a row would renew for virtually the entire NASCAR calendar in back-to-back big money deals. So, with that, I'm going to pass this all on to you and ask, what was your favorite moment from NASCAR on NBC's first tenure? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to my channel for more great NASCAR content. Thank you so much to all my channel members for your continued support, and until next time, have a good one.